All right, so we have the pocket sixes on the river. There's no way this can be a bluff. There's no way this can be a value bet, so we're just going to be checking. What? Oh, wait, who played this hand? I played this hand yesterday when I was generating some content. This is a 100 NL hand I wanted to play against some low-stakes regs, and I wanted to try to destroy them for you guys. I think this is actually a good play, and I'm going to talk about why. So low-stakes regs have a few things in common that allow us to play very exploitatively against them. Firstly, they're too tight. Almost every low-stakes student that hires me for coaching is going to have a losing red line, too low of a 1-win soft flop stat. They're not scrapping, they're not fighting, they're not turning things into bluffs enough, they're not taking advantage of fold equity. They simply don't know which spots are really rich in fold equity, so they're not harvesting it. Secondly, they think too much in absolute hand strength. That means they're looking at roughly how their hand looks, they're clicking buttons, they're not hand reading their opponent hard enough or thinking about their relative hand strength against the action sequence, texture, etc. enough. Thirdly, low stakes regs don't think enough. They play on autopilot. They don't know when to slow down and truly start using their brains. One of the biggest differences between a higher stakes player and a low stakes reg is that the higher stakes guy is going to know when to really stop, slow down and think, whereas the low stakes reg is going to autopilot click his way through lots of sessions and just expect to have a win rate. It's not going to work. Fourthly and finally, and relevantly to this hand, the low stakes reg does not protect their checking range well enough in virtually any spot. Okay, let's get back to sixes. Let's put all of that together and let's see how I arrived at this somewhat weird looking play. Our story begins pre-flop where we open the sixes on the button. We're called by a player that has stats of something like 22-17, sort of a tight, regular, okay, they don't have a full stack, which is a bit weird. On GG Poker, there are some sort of semi-recreational, semi-reg players that don't top up, but they play like tight regs for all intents and purposes. We go to the flop of 10-8-8, and we start with a check here. We're checking very often in this case, and we face 1/3. They're going to basically bet here without too much definition. They're going to merge. They're going to bet low pairs at a very high frequency. They're going to bet bigger pairs than sixes, 10x, some bluffs and stabs and stuff, and even some ace high like ace queen that just looks like it should probably be a check. So their range is just kind of all over the place here. On this king turn, we are going to get a lot more of a transparent idea about what they actually have. They check back. I would expect this to be a king or better almost never, like single digits of the time, probably like 5% of the time at most. Their range here is mostly going to be, well, the pocket pairs that they flat pre-flop, which are going to be more geared towards 7s, 9s, jacks, possibly like hands we beat like 5s here as well, and of course 10x, like jack 10, ace 10, that just doesn't like the king and is deciding not to go for thin value. The river is a 3, and one thing is for sure, we have a good amount of showdown value if we check in this spot. That means that checking has positive EV, right? But that, guys, is not in and of itself a sufficient reason for checking. Just because you have showdown value does not make checking the highest EV play. That's right. Bluffing could still be better. And that's what we decide to do here. I've come up with a little EV calculation, some estimates, a proof, if you will, that this play is better than checking. And I'm not saying this is the best play possible. There might be better sizes, right? But let's leave that for now. Let's take a look at my EV calculation, my estimates here. Let's geek out a little bit, if we may. The EV of check is basically pretty simple to calculate. It's going to be the size of the pot in big blinds multiplied by the percentage of the time that we expect to win that pot by checking. I've estimated here that we win about 30% of the time by checking, because I think Villain's range has a lot of combos of 7s and 9s in it here. I do think it has some 4s and 5s in it as well, which we're going to win against. And I do think we're going to win against like an unpaired hand that didn't bluff the turn, like maybe ace high. I do think if Villain has a hand like queen jack or something, they're very likely to bluff the turn. And there's also the chance that we check the river here, they bet, and then we are indifferent or we fold. I don't think this is a good bluff catching spot against a low stakes reg in particular. So basically, I think we lose this pot somewhere around 70% of the time when we check. Checking is really winning though, right? It's a very positive thing to do, and so most people just check here without thinking because they understand that. However, let's explore the EV of the bet size that we chose. I have estimated that the low stakes reg on GG Poker, and just to qualify, GG regs are tighter than they are in most other places, right? So fold equity is typically better. Their ranges are more capped, they're folding more of it. That doesn't mean this play doesn't work on other sites. I just think it works better in a game like GG 100 or 50NL or even 200 Russian cash or something like that. So I've estimated under the EV of bet that it basically works 80% of the time. I don't think that this is too optimistic, because I think that villain usually just has a pocket pair here, something that beats us like 7s, 9s, or jacks. I think they can also have a 10 here, and I think a 10 will usually fold to this sizing the vast majority of the time. I think villain will not have a king very often at all, and will almost never have some kind of trap like quads or pocket 10s or something like that, although it will happen occasionally. So I've gone for 80% here. This is partially based on experience of playing this sort of pool. You might think this is a little high, but I do think this bet gets through almost always. Now, it is true that when this bet gets through, you're often folding out just worse hands and sixes, but that doesn't matter for the EV calculation. It's just the fold equity that matters here. So 80% of the time, by this assumption, we win the pot. So we just multiply the size of the pot by 0.8 and we get 7.31 big blinds on the branch where it works. On the branch where it doesn't work, in red here, which occurs 20% of the time, we lose this bet, 16.71 big blinds, and our EV is therefore minus 3.34 big blinds overall. We add those numbers together and we actually see that the EV of betting, if these assumptions are correct, is better than the EV of checking, and notably so, it's over a big blind better. Now, you could object to this in a myriad different ways. You could say that I've been too optimistic about the fold equity, I've underestimated the showdown value. You could argue I've not picked the right sizing here, which is almost certainly true. There's probably some sizing that's a bit better. But yeah, overall, my case here is that against tight regulars who aren't really thinking that well and are folding too much and are too capped, bluffing with sixes here is better than taking the showdown value. If we had a hand like ace-queen that has even less showdown value, and blocks more 10x and unblocks more pocket pairs like sixes, it would become so mandatory to bluff that we wouldn't even really need to have this conversation. So even if you think sixes is on the fence here, something like fours or ace queen is now quite obviously better to bluff, right? Maybe sevens, nines we start checking, maybe it's somewhere around there, but this is how we should be thinking about this spot. We don't just check whenever we have showdown value, we compare fold equity. We're vultures. We should be hungry for fold equity, and this is a great example of how to do that. Let's see what happened in the hand. Villain folded instantly, and I basically realized that they probably just folded a worse hand than sixes, but they may also have folded nines or sevens or something like that. I do think nines and sevens specifically are by far the most sort of common hands we run into here for what it's worth. But even if villain did fold a hand that just, you know, we're beating already, that's not the point. The EV calculation speaks for itself. Let me know what you think of it. Way number one to destroy low stakes regs is to turn your showdown value into a bluff hungrily when it's not that high and you think the fold equity for a certain bet size is very good, as it often will be against cap ranges. Let's move on to point two. You know, one of the most annoying things about playing against a low stakes reg is that they never bluff. Actually, they do bluff. They over bluff in many spots, in fact. And they underbluff in many other spots, and because you shouldn't be a brain-dead zombie who just repeats stupidly wide-ranging maxims, you should be able to figure out which spots are overbluffed and which spots are underbluffed. I believe this to be an overbluffed spot, and so I did decide to call here. But let's see how we got here, and what it is about the low-stakes reg that makes this overbluffed. Pre-flop, we open ace-queen offsuit in the small blind. I'd recommend doing a lot of checking in this spot against the low stakes reg because they stab too much. They stab without definition, and too right, you know, because in low stakes, stabbing is amazing. It prints money. People don't protect their checking ranges, as we've seen already. So they're actually right to stab a ton here. Okay, this guy doesn't stab on this occasion, but check calling ace queen high, a dominant hand. I mean, you could value bet it, but I just think the better way to exploit them is to stab. Against someone passive, though, you'd probably just value bet and take the denial, etc. On the 7 of hearts turn, we check again because our hand is a bluff catcher. It's a very, very good bluff catcher. It has a load of redraw when we're behind, and it's going to dominate many of the queen high hands they're going to bluff with. Some low stakes regs will even bet ace high here because they don't have a clue what they're doing. Easy call for us. We end up on the 10 of clubs river, and this low stakes reg overbets. He's saying he has a 10. That's what he's telling us here. That is really the only hand that makes sense with this sizing scheme. Okay, it could be the odd like pocket sevens that was desperate for you to call on the turn and just bet 1/3 in position, but I don't really buy it. Let's talk landing range. Landing range is so important, guys. The difference between landing range and range is that the landing range has a connotation that stresses what villain got to a spot with before they did anything. And that's really key to understand, because on the flop here, we have not filtered them, we've not caused them to shed the bottom of their range at all. It just went check, check, remember? Therefore, when they make this bet on the turn, they are selecting from an extremely wide array of random shit hands. It's also blind versus blind, which makes the landing range infinitely wide. Like, bigger than the Andromeda galaxy. Yeah? I was watching a video on Andromeda last night. Do you know it's going to collide with the Milky Way one day? Sad times. We won't be here, guys, don't worry. So we decide to call, and then when we face this, villain could be bluffing. They have a very small value region, which is a 10, that A, didn't bet the flop, B, only bet small on the turn, and then C, overbet the river. It doesn't really add up, right? Although it is possible, we'll definitely run into a 10 here sometimes. And secondly, and more importantly, they've got this giant vat of bluffs to choose from. Imagine like a gigantic cylindrical container, like an industrial sized one, just swimming in bluffs. That's what they've chosen from here. So we need about 34% to call. Slightly over pot. Pot's 33%. That's your milestone. Learn milestones. The amount of people that don't know milestones, by the way, blows my mind. Like, literally blows my mind. And for you to not be winning by calling here, villain needs to have twice as many 10x as they do random bluffs. Doesn't add up. How often do I win here by calling? I'm going to guess 75% of the time. In a spot where I need 34% equity. That's right. Because GTO is so set up, it's so rigged, it's so synthetic and manufactured, reality doesn't really resemble it in any spot that requires finesse, skill, restraint, any of these qualities. Qualities that the 100 NL reg is lacking. The funny thing is, the way villain plays his hand is actually probably fine against the population. He doesn't bet the flop with Jack 9. Okay, I would just bet because like it's so overfolded and under raised. On the turn, I would bet bigger because I just want to like get more pot capture by generating fold equity across the next two streets. And then on the river, yeah, his play's probably great because, as I said at the start, the low stakes reg, you know, is usually going to be clicking buttons, not hand reading, not slowing down, autopiloting. So just see a big bet and fold ace queen. Villain's plays fine in the population. They're gigantically over bluffing, like a mad person, but their play is fine. But they ran into someone who was thinking about the spot. That's the problem for them. So I'm folding none of my range in the spot. 0% of my range is folding here because I believe I have more than double the required equity to call. So let's sum this up. The second way of destroying low stakes regs is to look for wide range spots where they're over bluffing. Punish over bluffing. It will happen in certain situations. Do not fall prey to they never bluff. If you do that, you've really severely stunted your poker growth forever. Okay, not forever. You can undo that, but there are spots that are really overbluffed by the low stakes reg. Then there are spots that are underbluffed. You've got to know the difference. So this looks like a good spot, right? Got all of our money in with a set deep. 266 big blinds about to go into our stack, right, guys? Right? There's no way we could lose here. Surely. Okay, let's see how we got here. Let's look at the third way to destroy low stakes reg. And that is fast play your good hands. This isn't universally true. There are some spots where you don't want to fast play good hands. I'm not going to talk about the exceptions here. We don't have the time. I just want to show you the norm. The reason you should fast play your good hands against low stakes reg is that their ranges for attacking, raising you on the flop, barreling you on the turn, raising you on the turn, are equity driven. They're going to be very much consisting of big value hands and higher equity bluffs. They're typically going to be underdoing it with the low equity bluffs, and if you do slow play, they're not going to be blasting off enough. They're not going to be aggressive enough later. If villain check raises us on the flop here and then barrels off they're going to be under bluffing in the pool, and we should be folding bluff catchers, not a set, right? Therefore, it doesn't make sense to take the top of our range and start slow playing with it, because our opponent is just not donating with the bottom of their range often enough, not as often as a really strong poker player like GTO Wizard, right? Therefore, we should just fast play here. What is villain's range for raising us on 9-6-4 two-tone? Fundamentally, it's going to be a set of 4s, a set of 9s, 9-6 suited, although that's blocked heavily, 4-6 suited, jacks, something like this maybe, 10s, ace-9, and then lots of combos of draws. I mean, like, tons of combos of club. Club is going to be a huge part of this range. What's villain not going to have enough here? Lower equity bluffs like the Jack-10 of hearts. If I thought someone had tons of Jack-10 of hearts and things like that, I would maybe consider slow playing here, but on a really dynamic, changeable texture, where we're definitely getting tons of action by 3-betting the flop right now against all of those draws and worse value hands that we're coolering, it would be pretty criminal in a low-stakes game like 100 Russian cash, where this hand comes from, to not just fast play the flop. I see students so often just call here, and it's hemorrhaging a lot of money. We fast play, villain rips it in, we snap it off, and we win against the Jack Deuce of clubs. This is a pretty horrible flop jam. Villain's hand's becoming close to a fold on the flop, but this is why 3-betting the flop is so good against low stakes regs check raising ranges, and why you just shouldn't slow play in general. They're just going to be putting so many combos of draws and value into that raising range that slow playing here is just criminal. I see so many of my students be terrified of their opponent folding, trying to win something at all costs. Just put the money in. Value bet properly, especially on boards like this. Okay, if the board was ace king 5 rainbow and I faced this line, I would just call, because even though I don't expect my opponent to bluff very often, I can get the money in myself and I don't have to rush it. I'm in position. But on 9-6-4 two-tone, it's very important that we fast play in all spots like this. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more from me and from Carrot Corner and how we teach the game, good news, the January sale is still going on for another couple of days. Only this is the 29th of January this is coming out. It will be finished by the 1st of February. Check it out while the snow is still falling at carrotcorner.com, and it's still 25% off all of our courses. Do hit the like button, it helps us grow this channel. Do comment, let us know what you think, and good luck smashing the low stakes regs in your games to pieces. I hope this video has been of service. See you next time.